The soup didn't spill by accident. He meant it, and when it hit her chest, hot, thick, and reeking of lobster cream, no one moved. No one gasped. No one stood up. They just watched, then looked away. And 5 days later, the man who humiliated her lost everything. It happened at La Reverie Bistro, a white tablecloth restaurant in the heart of Union Square. The kind where napkins are folded like swans, and nobody raises their voice above a whisper. It was a Thursday evening, just after 6:30 p.m. Imani Sinclair, 14 years old, sat at table 6 by the window. Small-framed, quiet, dressed in a navy cardigan and soft beige slacks. Hair tied back, lips still, eyes calm. No phone, no noise, just stillness. Her grandmother had stepped into the restroom 10 minutes earlier, trusting the staff would be decent. She was wrong. The man approached from behind the bar. Rick Carlson, general manager. Late 50s, tall, 2'10" for San Francisco, dressed like someone who believed respect was earned by zip code. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside Imani's table and stared. His eyes flicked to her untouched menu, then to her water, then, almost suspiciously, to her skin. "You shouldn't be sitting here," he finally said. Not kindly. Imani turned her head and looked up. "I'm waiting for my grandmother. She made the reservation." Rick tilted his head. "What's her name?" "Eleanor Sinclair." He didn't write it down, didn't check the list, just smirked. "We've had a lot of walk-ins lately. Neighborhood's changing," he said, voice low. "People who think they belong, but this isn't that kind of place." She didn't respond, not because she didn't know how, but because she knew exactly how it would go if she did. Rick turned, walked a few steps to the side station, grabbed a steaming bowl of bisque, and without a word, walked back. And then, he poured it. The soup splashed the white tablecloth first, but some landed on Imani's wrist, soaking the edge of her cardigan and her blouse beneath. She flinched only slightly. Rick placed the empty bowl down, casually, like it was a tray of breadsticks. "There," he said. "Now you've got something to do while you wait." Then he walked away. A few heads turned. One server paused mid-step. A couple at the bar whispered, watching from a safe distance. But no one said anything. Not to Rick, not to her, not even to each other. Imani picked up her napkin slowly, blotted her wrist. Her fingers were steady. A moment later, her grandmother returned. The older woman froze when she saw the scene. Spilled soup, soiled clothes. Her granddaughter sitting quietly in the middle of it all. "What happened?" she asked, gently moving to Imani's side. Imani looked up at her. "It's fine. I didn't say anything." Eleanor narrowed her eyes, scanning the room, her gaze hardening at Rick's retreating back. "He did this?" A nod, nothing more. "Do you want me to—" "No, Grandma. Please. Let's just go." The words weren't fear. They were clarity. That night, back in her room, tucked inside a sleek, glass-walled home in Pacific Heights, Imani sat at her desk, changed into a hoodie, hair still damp from her shower. She opened her laptop, clicked on a violet app marked EthosCore Live. A soft chime, then a prompt. "Welcome, Imani Sinclair Observer, Level 9 Verified Access Granted. Live Ethical Tracking Interface, Test Mode." She stared at the screen for a long second. Then she opened the internal form titled Report Incident, Real World Observer Entry. She filled in the details, line by line. Location, La Reverie Bistro. Date, June 11th, 6:42 p.m. Observer, I. Sinclair. Category, discrimination, harassment, minor targeted misconduct. Staff involved, Rick Carlson, GM. Witness response, non-intervention. Subject reaction, silent compliance. Notes, soup assault, no verbal escalation, no profanity. She paused. Attached a blurry still image. Her phone had captured the last 2 seconds before the soup was poured, thanks to its automatic motion buffer. Rick's arm mid-tilt, her face unreadable, the bowl already tipping. At the bottom of the form was a large button in gold. Trigger ethics escalation. Live system test. She hovered her mouse over it. One click would flag the restaurant's entire EthosCore profile for real-time review. Immediate downgrade to non-compliant. Trigger alerts to ESG fund partners. Initiate temporary license holds for food and operations in 3 regions. And notify 4 consumer watchdog platforms. Just one click. Her finger moved, but she didn't press it. Not yet. She shut the laptop gently, walked over to her bookshelf, and pulled down a thin leather journal. Opening to the next blank page, she wrote just one sentence. He poured soup like I didn't matter. Then beneath it, let's see if the system thinks I do. Back downstairs, her mother's office light was still on. Behind that closed door was Imani Sinclair, founder of EthosCore, an ethics tech company now adopted in 42 states and over 19 industries. But tonight, she was just a tired mother reviewing industry proposals. She had no idea her daughter had just logged a formal report that would, if processed, bring a restaurant empire to its knees. Not for vengeance, but for something much quieter. Dignity. The next morning, the house was silent except for the hum of the espresso machine in the kitchen. Imani sat at the island counter, swirling her spoon in a bowl of oatmeal that had long gone cold. She wasn't hungry. She wasn't angry either. Just awake in a new kind of way. Across the marble counter sat her mother, Imani Sinclair, hair tied up, reading something on her tablet with laser focus. She looked like every business magazine's dream of a modern CEO. Crisp navy blouse, light makeup, eyes that missed nothing. "Did you sleep?" Naomi asked, without looking up. Imani shrugged. "A little." Naomi glanced at her daughter and immediately caught the tension. "What happened?" Imani hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing that I couldn't handle." Naomi raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. She trusted her daughter's silence as much as her words. Still, she filed the tone away like a mental sticky note. "Big day today," Naomi said, closing the tablet. "I have 3 board briefings and a closed-door session with the Public Ethics Committee. But if you need me, I'm okay," Imani said quickly. Naomi nodded, studying her child for another quiet second. "Your observer dashboard is still open this week. If you want to experiment, feel free. But remember, it's a simulation, not a real trigger." Imani stirred her oatmeal again. "What if it wasn't?" Naomi paused. "Wasn't what? What if someone clicked the button, like, for real?" Naomi tilted her head. "Well, there are safeguards. Observer accounts can't trigger live escalation. Only full admin levels have that power. And even then, it's reviewed by the ethics board within 24 hours. Imani said nothing. Naomi looked at her more carefully now. "You didn't click anything last night, did you?" Imani smiled faintly. "I said I didn't sleep much. I didn't say I had nothing to do." At 9:14 a.m., across town at EthosCore's San Francisco office, a small notification blinked to life inside the internal risk console. Alert! Emergency ethics escalation. Flagged entry. Observer 9. Location: La Reverie Bistro. Category: minor directed abuse. Source: test credential. Level 9 RI. Sinclair system. Override. Verified status. Pending immediate review. In the risk monitoring room, a young ethics technician named Calvin furrowed his brow. He leaned closer to his screen. Guys, I think someone just tripped a level 9 alert on a flagged restaurant. But this came from a simulation account?" He turned to his supervisor, Alicia Moon, a sharp-eyed systems engineer who usually didn't like to be interrupted before her second coffee. She rolled her chair over. "Simulation accounts can't trigger live alerts," she said automatically. "It's read only." "Yeah, well, not this one." Alicia scanned the metadata. Her eyebrows lifted. "Observer ID. Sinclair, I." She blinked. Oh, hell. She pulled out her phone and typed fast. At 9:38 a.m., Naomi's phone vibrated during her board prep meeting. Alicia Moon, EthosCore Engineering. Naomi, we have a problem. Or maybe a solution. Your daughter's account triggered an emergency escalation, and it worked. Call me before legal sees this. Naomi's heart skipped. She quietly stood up, stepped out of the room, and called back. What do you mean it worked? Naomi asked. Alicia's voice was low but firm. I mean, the button wasn't supposed to fire, but it did, because apparently someone in testing forgot to disable the live route on Observer 9 accounts. Her trigger went straight into the system. Naomi blinked. Is it too late to roll it back? Technically, yes. The alert's already been routed to ESG review partners. The restaurant's profile is locked pending investigation, and their operating license is currently under review in 3 districts. 3? They were already on our risk watch list, remember? Your daughter's report just lit the match. Naomi didn't respond right away. Naomi? Alicia prompted. Do you want us to kill the escalation? We can override manually, but we'd have to fabricate a justifying error. It'll look messy, or... Naomi closed her eyes, and for a long moment, she wasn't a CEO. She was just a mother. She reported the incident by the book? Naomi asked. Yes, Alicia confirmed. Flawless report. Timeline, categories, image evidence, notes. Even tone neutral, like a trained ethics auditor. Naomi exhaled, long, slow, then let it proceed. Back at home, Imani was curled up in her reading chair when her mother returned. Naomi didn't say anything at first. She just sat across from her daughter and looked at her. Soup? Naomi said quietly. Imani nodded. Public? Very. Naomi leaned forward, elbows on knees. Did anyone stand up for you? No. Naomi looked down at her hands. And you reported it? Imani nodded again. I attached proof, not just the incident, but the way everyone stayed quiet. Naomi pressed her lips together, then nodded slowly. I didn't think you'd actually use the system. Imani tilted her head. Isn't that the point of building it? Naomi looked at her child, really looked. And for the first time in days, she didn't see her daughter. She saw a future leader. Later that evening, Naomi stood before the Ethics Oversight Board. 7 industry professionals, 3 lawyers, and 2 consumer advocates, each staring at the projected case summary on the screen behind her. This escalation, Naomi said calmly, was triggered by a level 9 observer, a minor, a member of the public we designed this system to protect, not empower. And yet, her report was more complete, more professional, and more ethically grounded than half the ones filed this quarter. A murmur rippled through the board. Naomi clicked to the next slide. A pixelated photo appeared. Rick Carlson mid-motion, soup flying. Gasps. She didn't shout, Naomi said. She didn't retaliate. She filed, quietly, through the proper channel. Pause. The system responded, because it was finally told the truth. Meanwhile, inside La Reverie Bistro, Rick Carlson checked his email and froze. Urgent. License status suspended, pending ethics review. Notice. ESG fund withdrawal, effective immediately. Flag. EthosCore score dropped to non-compliant. He felt the walls of his empire shift beneath him. His phone rang. The regional director. He didn't answer. Upstairs, Naomi opened the door to Imani's room. Her daughter was sketching something. Lines and arrows, flowcharts, something about invisible influence. Naomi smiled. Do you know what you just did? Imani shrugged. I didn't press it to be powerful, she said. I pressed it because no one else did. Rick Carlson had always considered himself untouchable. 32 years in hospitality, 15 of them running front-of-house operations for Maison and Morrow Group, a chain of upscale restaurants across 3 states. He wore Italian loafers, drank imported coffee, and had connections in every city council where he operated. But at 6:17 p.m. on a quiet Friday, all of that began to crumble. He was in his office at La Reverie Bistro, sipping an old-fashioned and reviewing staff schedules when the first email came through. Subject: Emergency Alert. Ethics Escalation. Active investigation in progress. From EthosCore Systems Compliance. Dear Mr. Carlson, an official escalation has been filed against La Reverie Bistro, location Union Square. Category: minor directed public misconduct. Escalation level 9. As a result, your location has been flagged for immediate review. ESG-linked capital funding is hereby frozen pending full compliance review. Local operating license has been temporarily suspended. Section 42B, Youth Protection Protocol. Your EthosCore score has dropped to non-compliant. Public-facing restaurant listings will reflect this rating within 24 hours. Please prepare your team for immediate third-party audit. Regards, Compliance Department. EthosCore. Rick stared at the screen. Non-compliant? He scrolled again, reread the words, froze when he saw the attached case ID. There it was. Filed by Imani Sinclair, Observer Level 9. And suddenly, it clicked. The girl. The soup. The silence. 2 hours later, headquarters called. The call came from Brent Kessler, VP of Operations for the parent group. Rick picked up, trying to sound casual. Rick, Brent said without preamble. What the hell is going on in Union Square? Rick swallowed. It's a misunderstanding, a minor incident. Some kid exaggerated. No, Rick, not some kid. Do you know who she is? Rick paused. No. She's Naomi Sinclair's daughter. Silence. As in Naomi Sinclair of EthosCore. As in the reason our entire brand still qualifies for ESG investment in California and Oregon. Rick felt the blood drain from his face. We're hemorrhaging. Delish and Book a Table already pulled our listings. That's half our dinner reservations gone overnight. Our primary lender froze $27 million of revolving credit, all because you poured soup on a child and thought no one would find out. Rick tried to speak. Brent cut him off. You're suspended, indefinitely. HR will contact you for exit logistics, and if you speak to the press, we'll sue. Click. Rick sat alone in the office, phone still in hand, surrounded by the curated silence of his once flawless restaurant. He'd built an empire on control. Now it was collapsing because a girl he didn't bother to see pressed a button he didn't believe existed. Across the city, in the sleek open-floor offices of EthosCore, a very different conversation was unfolding. Alicia Moon, head of engineering operations, stood beside Naomi Sinclair at the digital ethics dashboard, a 16-foot wall of real-time data tracking violations across thousands of businesses. Imani's case glowed in red at the top of the screen. 3 more locations just tipped into escalation review, Alicia said. 2 from Seattle, 1 in Oakland. Naomi folded her arms. Same patterns? Mostly. Internal reports from previous months that were dismissed or under-investigated. Now that one case has gone public, the algorithm is resurfacing linked incidents. Alicia turned, voice softer. You know she didn't mean for all this to happen, right? Naomi looked toward the glass windows. The city lights flickered beneath the dusk. She didn't mean to, Naomi said. But maybe I did. That night, a video surfaced online. A grainy, 30-second clip recorded from a corner table. It showed Rick Carlson walking up to Imani, words inaudible, but posture aggressive. Then, unmistakably, he reached over and poured soup across the table. The bowl clattered, the girl flinched, and the dining room froze. The caption read, "He didn't raise his voice. She didn't raise hers. So the system raised it for her." The clip hit 2.7 million views overnight. On Twitter, hashtags began trending. Imani. Sinclair, #soup silence. Ethics, trigger. She pressed. One user wrote, "My daughter watches this little girl take it all and still report like a pro. That's leadership." Another, "She didn't post a rant, she didn't scream. She used the system we all ignore, and it worked. A third? White men have been pouring soup on black girls metaphorically for decades. Imani just brought the receipts. At 7:52 a.m. the next morning, Naomi stepped into Imani's room. Her daughter was awake, curled up with a notebook. "You went viral," Naomi said softly. Imani looked up. "I didn't post it." "I know. Someone else in the restaurant did." Pause. "I didn't do it for attention," Imani added. "I know that too." Naomi sat at the edge of the bed. "People are asking questions. Some want to turn you into a symbol. Some want to protect you. Some want to dismiss you as a privileged kid with connections. But the truth?" Imani waited. "You were just ethical, quietly, deliberately, and bravely. That's rarer than most people think." Imani smiled faintly. "I didn't want revenge," she said. "I just didn't want it to happen again." Naomi reached out and took her hand. "That's why the system exists. But we forget sometimes. It takes someone like you to remind the system what it's for." Meanwhile, at Maison & Moreau's corporate HQ, chaos was unfolding. Their public relations team scrambled to issue a carefully worded statement. The CEO, Charles Morrow, refused to appear on camera. Investors demanded emergency meetings. Franchise owners called in a panic. By noon, 5 restaurants across California voluntarily closed for internal training and realignment. And Rick? He spent the day watching the news coverage in stunned silence, alone in his apartment, phone buzzing non-stop with texts he no longer answered. No lawsuits, no confrontation, just silence. And the quiet weight of being seen clearly for the first time, and it costing him everything. Back at home, Imani returned to her dashboard. The incident was now marked under review, closed by escalation. She opened her journal and wrote, "He poured soup like I wasn't real. The system showed him I was." Then she turned the page and began drafting her next report. It was the 4th day since the soup incident went viral. By now, 8 Maison & Moreau locations had closed. 2 franchise investors had pulled out, and #ShePressed it was still trending on X, formerly Twitter. But the most dangerous silence wasn't online. It was inside boardrooms. 7:42 a.m. EthosCore headquarters, Naomi Sinclair sat at the edge of the briefing table, notepad untouched, coffee untouched. On the screen behind her, a live heat map of ESG escalations across the country, glowing like an angry constellation. She turned to Alicia Moon. "Any response from Maison & Moreau?" They released a 4-sentence statement, no apology, just committed to training and understanding the impact of recent events. Alicia frowned. "PR fluff." Naomi nodded slowly. "What about child safety compliance?" "They're not on record for any proactive protocols." Naomi leaned back. "Then they're about to get caught in the second wave." Alicia arched a brow. "You're launching it?" Naomi's voice dropped. "It's time. The public wants accountability. Let's give them a framework for it." She tapped her screen. The prototype opened. Child Integrity Protocol, CIP V10. A first-of-its-kind ethics module that would rate restaurants and hospitality chains based on their treatment of underage patrons. Across town, Maison & Moreau legal office. Inside a dim-lit conference room, 5 white men in gray suits were in damage control mode. "We didn't even know she was connected to EthosCore," one snapped. "That's the problem," another replied. "She wasn't wearing a name tag, no entourage, just a girl in a hoodie. She's the daughter of the CEO of the system that grades our ethics scores. That's insider manipulation." Another chimed in. "It's worse. I heard she's part of the Observer pilot program. She had actual authority to flag us." Silence. Then one muttered what they all feared. "So, she wasn't just a customer. She was the audit." Meanwhile, back in Imani's room, Imani scrolled through comments on the viral video. Most were kind, but a few stung. "Bet her mommy pulled strings. System privilege, not justice. She's just a kid. What power does she really have?" She closed the tab, took a deep breath. She never wanted any of this. Not the fame, not the hashtags, just accountability. She opened a blank doc and began typing quietly. You don't have to yell to expose harm. You don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to report what happened and let the truth carry the weight. 11:30 a.m. EthosCore Global Press Conference. For the first time in 2 years, Naomi Sinclair stepped in front of live cameras. Flanked by leaders from the Children's Ethics Council, UN Hospitality Standards Division, and 3 international rating agencies, she addressed a packed room of reporters. Last week, a minor was publicly humiliated inside a restaurant that had passed multiple compliance checks. That minor happened to be my daughter. But that's not why we're here. We're here because she followed the rules. She reported it through the system, and the system worked. Today, we introduced the Child Integrity Protocol, the first ethics index built specifically to evaluate how underage individuals are treated in public-facing industries. A buzz ran through the room. She continued, starting this quarter, restaurants, airlines, hotels, and schools will be scored not just on environmental or labor practices, but on how they interact with children, teenagers, and vulnerable youth. No more excuses. No more, she was just a kid. If your business serves the public, your ethics must include every age. A round of applause erupted. Not thunderous, but deliberate. Controlled. Powerful. Online. 2 hours later, EthosCore's portal updated. CIP compliance status, live green. Certified child safe. Yellow, under review. Red, flagged for non-compliance. Gray, no submission equals automatic downgrade. Maison and Morrow's entire chain turned bright red. Back at home. That evening, Imani sat beside her mom on the couch, half watching the evening news. Her name was everywhere. The clip was now at 4.2 M views. You okay? Naomi asked. Imani nodded. I think so. You don't have to talk to the press if you don't want to. I know. You did more by staying quiet than some people do with microphones. Imani glanced down, then whispered, Some people still think I was only heard because of you. Naomi paused, then smiled gently. The system didn't listen to you because you're my daughter. The system listened because you used it right. That's the part no one can take away. 2 days later, Mason and Morrow headquarters, Charles Morrow, the once untouchable CEO, was forced to step down after a 7-2 board vote. In his resignation letter, he blamed the destabilizing impact of digital ethics. Warfare, a phrase that quickly became a meme. Rick Carlson was seen leaving an HR exit meeting with a box of personal items and no farewell party. And in every location still operating under the M&M brand, a new sticker was posted by the front door. This location is under review for child integrity. We are cooperating with EthosCore. No one had to say what that meant. Everyone felt what it meant. Final scene. That night, Imani received a private message from a girl in Atlanta. I work at a fast food place. Last month, a manager screamed at a 12-year-old autistic boy in front of everyone. I just reported it through the new CIP form. I didn't think I could do anything before, but I saw your story. Thank you. Imani stared at the message for a while. Then, for the first time since the soup incident, she smiled. Not because of revenge, not because of power, but because something had changed. And this time, it wasn't temporary. 8:15 a.m., New York City. The media storm was still spinning, but for Imani Sinclair, things had gone quiet again. Just the way she liked it. No more press calls, no more hashtags, no more doorbell ringing reporters asking if they could get a quote from the girl who shut down a restaurant empire. She was just back to being a 14-year-old black girl who liked soft hoodies, acoustic playlists, and her own quiet corner of the world. But inside the offices of Skycrest Hospitality Group, a 3.7B restaurant conglomerate that quietly owned 22 different dining chains, that quiet was starting to sound a lot like thunder. 8:47 a.m., Skycrest boardroom, 2 VPs stood in front of a digital dashboard displaying a new word none of them liked. Child, ethics, non-compliant, flagged by system. This was never a thing before, one VP muttered. What the hell is child integrity protocol? It's Naomi Sinclair's new ethics trigger, the other answered. Scans every reported incident involving underage guests across restaurants, schools, hotels. And this girl, Imani, she used it first? No, she tested it, and it worked too well. Across the screen, the names of 4 Skycrest-owned franchises flashed yellow. 2 had just been flagged after unrelated complaints from teen diners, and suddenly, a $640 million quarterly acquisition deal was being reconsidered by investors. It's Domino's, the head of legal muttered. She didn't just press a button, she woke the machine. Meanwhile, Imani's home. Naomi was packing for DC. I won't be long, she told Imani. Just the FAA ethics hearing and a panel at Howard. Imani sat on the couch, blanket wrapped around her, holding a mug of cocoa. I'm not going anywhere. Naomi smiled. You already did. Then she knelt beside her daughter and said softly, Do you know why they're really mad? Not because you flagged the report, not because you used the system. They're mad because you weren't afraid to say something while looking like no one. That landed. Imani just nodded. 12:03 p.m. A luxury restaurant in Charleston at Bellecourt and Rye, a restaurant known for $95 lamb chops and elevated Americana. A 16-year-old Latina girl named Isa was denied a table despite her reservation. The hostess had told her bluntly, You don't look like the kind of guest we usually seat here. Isa's cousin recorded it. By 1:45 p.m., the video hit 820K views on TikTok. By 2:22 p.m., it was uploaded with the hashtag CIP violation. By 3:03 p.m., EthosCore flagged Bellecourt and Rye as pending red in the system. And across every Skycrest brand Slack channel, employees began panicking. Back to Skycrest. Emergency Zoom meeting. An older executive named Bill tapped the table. We underestimated this kid. It's not just her, someone replied. There are already 9 minors who've reported violations this week. And that CIP system, every submission is time-stamped, geotagged, verified. She turned the whole idea of too young to matter into a lie, another muttered. Then came the question no one wanted to answer. What's her name again? A silence fell, until the VP of Brand Ethics cleared her throat and answered, Imani Sinclair, daughter of Naomi Sinclair, CEO of EthosCore, and apparently, the one testing the final phase of Observer Protocol. The room froze. Observer Protocol had been rumored, a system where select minors were given silent audit power inside live businesses, feeding live data back into EthosCore's AI. Bill leaned forward slowly. They didn't just send a girl into Maison and Morrow. They sent the system wearing a hoodie. That evening, TV panel show. The hosts were mid-debate. She's just a child, one analyst said. You really expect restaurant executives to bow to a teenager? Another shot back. She's a trained compliance observer who followed exact protocol. That's not a child. That's a whistleblower. But what if she's being used? No one forced her to be silent for 5 days while the system handled it perfectly. That's not manipulation. That's design. Back to Imani. Midnight. Alone in her room, Imani was watching videos. Not about herself. About Emmett Till, Claudette Colvin, Ruby Bridges. She didn't think she was like them, but she felt like their echo. Their small, quiet echo. Naomi knocked on the door softly. Still up? Imani nodded. Naomi sat at the edge of her bed. You changed something, and they know it. I didn't mean to. I know, but it needed to happen. They sat in silence. Then Naomi whispered, You gave people a blueprint. You showed them. You don't need power, you just need proof, and the right place to send it. Next morning, National Ethics Panel. Naomi stood at the podium. She had just finished her testimony before Congress regarding youth discrimination in hospitality industries. One senator asked, Why place so much weight on the actions of one teenager? Naomi replied, clear and calm, "We didn't. We placed the weight on a system designed to protect the young. That teenager simply believed it would work." A pause. She didn't yell. She didn't post. She followed the process and reminded the country what quiet power looks like. Ending scene. A week later, a boy in Michigan used the CIP form to report a hotel that refused service to his deaf sister. A girl in Texas used the system after a teacher humiliated her in front of the whole class. A 12-year-old with vitiligo submitted a video after being mocked by staff at a bakery. Each report fed the system. Each flag adjusted the scores, and one quiet name sat at the top of the algorithm's training credits. Observer 0, Imani Sinclair, verified field report. Maison and Morrow, closed. She didn't speak on any stage. She didn't go on television. But across America, business leaders were whispering the same question. Who trained the system to see kids? And the answer was soft, quiet, undeniable. A girl with soup on her sleeve. And justice in her silence. 9:02 a.m. Inside EthosCore. The glass walls buzzed with data. Charts moved like waves. But Naomi wasn't looking at the dashboard. She was watching her daughter. Imani stood at the front of the internal review room, holding a printed file. Her hand trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "This isn't just about me. It's about every kid who walked into a place where they were treated like less. We don't need revenge. We need a record." That last line landed with everyone in the room. She wasn't here for attention. She was here for infrastructure. Flashback. 2 weeks earlier, after the soup incident, Naomi had asked Imani a question that changed the entire trajectory. "Do you want us to erase what happened, or document it?" And Imani, after a long pause, said, "Document it, so no one can say it didn't happen." From that moment on, the case stopped being personal. It became the blueprint. 10:11 a.m. Mason and Morrow investors called Charles Morrow, disgraced and silenced, was no longer present. His replacement, a sharp, image-conscious interim CEO, tried to walk a tightrope. This was an unfortunate and isolated incident, but a bold shareholder named Ms. Elkins cut in. "It's not isolated, it's systemic. Your restaurants have flagged 3 CIP violations in the last 6 days. You didn't lose revenue because of a girl. You lost it because your system had no spine until she exposed it." No one responded, because everyone knew it was true. Meanwhile, in Chicago, 2 17-year-olds filed CIP reports on a downtown diner that had a no hats, no hoodies policy selectively enforced against black teens. The location was downgraded from compliant to red flagged in less than 48 hours. The diner shut down for remodeling, but everyone knew that wasn't paint being peeled. It was the cost of bias being paid. Back to EthosCore, the policy room. Imani sat at a long oval table surrounded by adult engineers, policy analysts, and ethics designers. She wasn't just included. She was leading. "This form still has too many words," she said, pointing at the CIP submission page. "Most kids won't finish it." A UX designer leaned forward. "What would you change?" Imani tapped her iPad. "Use emojis for tone. Add, 'I don't feel safe' as a quick button. And give kids a way to tell their side without needing perfect grammar." Naomi watched from behind the glass wall. Her daughter wasn't here to be symbolic. She was here to build usability from lived experience. Same time, legal threats roll. And Skycrest's attorneys sent a letter to EthosCore, accusing them of corporate entrapment and reputational warfare led by a minor. The board reviewed it, then laughed, because this wasn't war. It was compliance being measured out loud. Naomi dictated the response herself. "Our systems are designed to reflect human dignity. Your discomfort is not our liability. It's your audit result." Late night, Imani's bedroom, she stared at the screen of her phone. Not at likes, not at videos. She was reading anonymous CIP entries from kids across the country. Some were messy, some were heartbreaking. All of them were real. A 13-year-old wrote, "I don't know what I did wrong. I just sat there and they said I didn't belong." Another entry said, "They told my mom we were in the wrong restaurant, but we had a reservation. She cried in the car." Imani didn't cry, but her chest felt tight. She pressed verify on both. Next morning, boardroom announcement. Naomi gathered the board of EthosCore. "I want to recommend formal protocol updates. This isn't a pilot anymore, this is national." She laid out a single page, designed and written by Imani. The Dignity Trigger, a protocol that would automatically flag any public establishment that receives 3 or more CIP complaints within 30 days, triggering an ethics audit within 72 hours. No PR prep, no legal wrangling, just action. The board voted unanimously. Imani's words, quietly written on a laptop in her room, had just become federal-level ethics policy. Elsewhere, backlash brew. On certain channels, the resistance began. "This is overreach. One girl shouldn't decide industry ratings. Businesses are under attack from emotional children." But the system didn't care, because the system didn't need their approval. It needed data, documentation, patterns. And that's exactly what Imani had provided. Without shouting, without lawsuits, without a stage. She wasn't trying to cancel people. She was trying to catalog the cracks no one saw and build something stronger beneath them. Final scene. A mother's words. Imani and Naomi stood on a rooftop, watching the sun set over the skyline. Naomi handed her daughter a small card, a note she'd once written but never given her. It said, "You didn't change the world. You made it prove who it really was, and that's the first step to changing everything." Imani smiled. Not the kind you post, the kind that's heavy with meaning. She didn't need revenge. She didn't want headlines. She just wanted one thing: for the next kid to walk into a restaurant and not be treated like a problem. And now, that's exactly what was happening. At 8:05 a.m. in a high-security room deep inside the Ethics Policy Forum in D.C., all eyes were on the girl in the gray hoodie. No nameplate, no security entourage. Just a quiet presence that made the room go still. Imani Sinclair sat next to her mother, Naomi, in the front row. She didn't fidget, didn't smile, just waited. "Miss Sinclair," the chairman of the ethics board began gently, "we understand you're not here today as a victim." Imani gave a single nod. "You're not here as a whistleblower either." Another quiet nod. "Then who are you here as?" She spoke for the first time. "As proof." No one moved. "Proof that your systems worked when no one thought I mattered. Proof that policy didn't need volume to be powerful. Proof that a kid in a hoodie can follow the rules and make the rules follow her back." There was no applause, but no one dared look away. Though the hearing was closed to the public, word had already leaked. Hashtags were trending even before she walked into the room. #Imani Sinclair testifies. #dignity is policy. #she didn't yell, she documented. But no image had surfaced yet. That would change in a matter of hours. A senator leaned in. "What would you say to the business owners who feel threatened by this system?" Imani answered without hesitation. "I didn't touch their business. I touched their record. If your business depends on treating people badly and getting away with it, then you're not protecting your livelihood. You're protecting your silence." That quote would be everywhere by noon. Elsewhere across the country, something was changing. In Atlanta, high schoolers organized a CIP submission workshop. In Oakland, a small cafe put up a handwritten sign. "We serve food, not egos. All guests, all ages, all dignity." And in Buffalo, a 6th grader named Liam, once told to "wait outside until your mom gets here," submitted his first CIP complaint. His hands shook, but his words didn't. My voice was small, but I still wrote it down, like she did. Back in the committee room, Naomi stepped forward with a sealed binder. No PowerPoint, no preamble. "This is the CIP National Compliance Model. It's based on the 5-day aftermath of one child's experience. My daughters. The chairman asked, "Is this a suggestion or a demand?" Naomi looked directly at him. "It's a condition." No one challenged her, because they couldn't. 5 days earlier, Maison & Morrow had lost its final investor. The $92 million valuation had collapsed. CIP status was now being used by the FAA, by ESG-aligned financial platforms, by federal grant providers. A single red flag could cut off not just customers, but capital. This wasn't a pilot anymore. It was the new standard. When the hearing adjourned, Imani didn't stop for cameras. She didn't wave or speak to the reporters lining the sidewalk. She got into a black sedan, closed the door, and leaned against the window. Naomi drove in silence until Imani finally spoke. "I didn't want power," she whispered. "I just wanted to be counted." Back at EthosCore headquarters, the observer terminal lit up with more than 22,000 new reports in just 3 days. Kids in malls, teenagers in hotels, children at airports and grocery stores. Each report included a time, a place, a voice. On every screen, one name appeared, not as a user, but as the system's first ever verified pilot. Observer 0, Imani Sinclair. Not a celebrity, not a viral symbol, just a girl who documented what happened to her and made that documentation undeniable. Weeks later, the restaurant where it had all started was boarded up, its lease terminated, its branding stripped from every delivery app. But on the service door in the back alley, someone had spray-painted a simple line. She never raised her voice. And still, everything moved. No one knew who wrote it, but everyone knew what it meant. She didn't take down an empire. She didn't scream. She didn't call for boycotts. She filed a report, and that report changed how power listens. It had been 3 weeks since the restaurant closed. The story had died down online, the hashtags slowed, and the headlines faded. But inside EthosCore, something was just beginning. Imani sat in the design lab, hunched over a whiteboard. Her curls were pulled into a messy bun, marker stains on her fingertips. A new folder sat open in front of her, one she titled herself, CIP 2.0, From Report to Reform. She wasn't interested in going viral again. That wasn't the point. She was building something bigger, something permanent. "Okay," she muttered. "What happens after the entry?" Imani had been obsessing over the back end of the CIP system, not just how reports were submitted, but how they lived afterward. The problem with most systems? They let complaints pile up in silence. No feedback, no follow-up, no trust. So she asked herself, what would it feel like if your voice didn't just go in, but came back with action? That was the seed, the feedback loop. Her fingers flew across the touchscreen. She designed 3 new components. Live entry map, a visual map showing anonymous submissions nationwide, so no one felt alone. Auto ping notification, letting the person who filed a complaint know when their entry triggered an ethics audit. Restoration track, giving businesses the option to not just apologize, but complete verified ethics retraining and earn back their rating. Because that was the twist. She didn't just want to catch bad behavior. She wanted to give people a way to grow past it. Naomi walked in quietly and stood behind her, watching her daughter move through code, UX logic, human behavior, and emotion, like it was second nature. "You're not just designing software," Naomi said softly. Imani didn't look up. "I'm designing accountability people can feel." They didn't say anything for a while. Naomi finally added, "I have a call next week with the White House's Office of Community Tech. They want to see this." Imani looked up then. "Why?" "Because what you're doing isn't just compliance, it's cultural repair." For a second, Imani felt small, like a 14-year-old girl again. Then she remembered what brought her here. Not power, not politics, just one stupid bowl of soup that changed everything. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, a waitress named Lexi sat on her lunch break, scrolling through TikTok. One clip stopped her cold. A girl explaining the new CIP restoration track. Lexi recognized the voice, the face, the story. She had once been the server who rolled her eyes at a black family and blamed the kitchen for running out of the kids' meal. She didn't think much of it. No one had ever called her out. Now, her restaurant was flagged. Their rating dropped. And they were losing customers. Lexi watched the video again. Then she opened the CIP app, tapped on her flagged location, and hit the new button that hadn't been there last week. Begin restoration. She didn't expect a redemption arc. She just didn't want to be part of the problem anymore. Across the country, the feature exploded. Nearly 600 businesses entered the restoration track in the first 5 days. What surprised everyone wasn't who joined, but who didn't. The biggest chains refused. They sent legal threats, PR statements, denials, and the public noticed. CIP started publishing a transparency ledger, a weekly report of who responded and who didn't. The businesses that ignored the system saw sharp drops in foot traffic. The ones that leaned in surged, because what Imani had quietly built wasn't just a system of complaint, it was a culture of clarity. Back at EthosCore, Imani sat in on her first full policy summit. Most of the attendees were twice her age, lawyers, engineers, executives. She was the only teenager, the only one in sneakers. Still, when she raised her hand, they stopped to listen. "I think the word incident is too cold," she said. "Most kids don't say, 'I had an incident.' They say, 'This thing happened,' or 'It was messed up.' We should talk like them if we expect them to talk to us." A senior compliance director leaned in. "You're suggesting we rewrite the intake language?" Imani nodded. "I'm suggesting you speak human, not legal." The room laughed, but they listened. And by the next draft, she was right. At home that night, Naomi found a letter on her pillow. It was from Imani, handwritten. "Mom, I know you wanted me to get justice, but I didn't want justice if it meant someone else's silence. I wanted the truth to have a system. You gave me space to build that. So if anyone asks what you built, don't say a tech company. Say you built the kind of mother who raised a girl like me." Naomi didn't cry. She sat there for a long time, holding the letter, heart full and still. On the final page of Imani's new CIP dashboard, she added a quote. It didn't come from a TED Talk or an ethics professor. It came from her memory, from the night in the alley behind that restaurant, right after she got soup poured on her, when she had said almost nothing the whole ride home. Except this: just because I'm not yelling doesn't mean I don't see everything. Now, that line lived at the footer of every CIP page. No branding, no credit, just a quiet reminder that watching and documenting could shake systems louder than screaming. And that's exactly what it had done. The smell of garlic butter and linen starch still made Imani flinch. It had been nearly a month since that day at Maison and Morrow, but the memory lived like it had never left. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. No, in the way trauma sometimes lives. Quiet, folded up, like an old napkin you forget is in your pocket until it falls out again. Imani stood now in front of a different restaurant, smaller, local, Black-owned. No neon signs, just a window with hand-painted letters. Harper's Table, food for the soul and soul for the fight. Inside, the owner, Ms. Dana Harper, greeted her with a hug like she'd known her for years. In truth, she had only emailed Imani 3 days ago, asking if she'd speak to a group of teen girls who had been following the CIP story. They weren't media. They weren't looking for a soundbite. They just wanted to ask her real questions. Imani hesitated, then said yes. Now she was here, standing in front of 12 girls, ages 10 to 17, most of them black or brown, all of them wide-eyed. One girl raised her hand before introductions were even over. "Did it hurt?" she asked. "When he poured the soup on you?" Imani didn't flinch. She just said, "Not as much as when the manager told me to watch my tone." There was silence. Then a small gasp from one of the girls. "Wait, he did that after?" Imani nodded. The soup dried, but that moment stayed. Another girl asked, "How did you stay so calm?" Imani paused. "I didn't feel calm," she said honestly. "I felt invisible and angry. But I'd been trained my whole life to smile through that stuff, to not make a scene. So I didn't yell. I just wrote it down." A girl in the back whispered, "Like a superhero origin story." Imani laughed. "Kind of. Except I didn't get powers. I got documentation." They laughed too. But it wasn't just funny. It was liberating, because for the first time they saw what power could look like in their own reflection. Later that evening, Imani sat on the curb outside Harper's table, sipping on a bottle of mango lemonade. Her phone buzzed. A text from Naomi. "Call me, something's moving." She called instantly. Naomi's voice was steady but excited. "They just passed the proposal." Imani's stomach flipped. "The full vote?" "Unanimous. FAA, Federal Hospitality Board, even 3 of the big 5 insurance firms. CIP Restoration Protocol is now the required compliance tool for all federally licensed hospitality groups." Imani didn't say anything for a beat. Then, "So it's real now?" Naomi's voice softened. "It was real the second you stood up. Now it's just documented." Imani looked up at the street lamp blinking above her. She thought about how many times she'd walked past restaurants like this and wondered if she belonged, wondered if she'd be watched, judged, ignored. And now, her data, her quiet action, was the baseline for justice. The next day, Maison & Morrow's former flagship location in D.C. was auctioned off. It didn't make major headlines. No one held a press conference, but a small crowd had gathered out front. Journalists, activists, and a few neighborhood kids who had followed the story closely. One of them noticed something taped to the inside of the locked glass door. A single sheet of printer paper. On it was a quote, "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need a system that listens." Below it, Imani Sinclair, age 14. A camera clicked. That image, the empty restaurant, the sign, went viral in under 4 hours. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the dominoes kept falling. CIP became more than a system. It became a standard. Universities began embedding it in campus dining feedback. Airports launched a passenger dignity audit linked to CIP reports. A coalition of private investors pooled 18 numbers to fund a micro-grant program rewarding restaurants who completed the restoration track and maintained high dignity scores. The system had gone from protest to policy, and it had all started with a 14-year-old who didn't yell, didn't hit, didn't scream. She documented, and the world listened. One night, Naomi found Imani sitting in the living room, laptop open, headphones on. She wasn't coding. She was building a digital archive, not of reports, but of stories. Testimonies from other kids who had submitted their first CIP entry and what had changed because of it. There was Maya from Charlotte, who was told that table's for adults at a bakery, and Theo from Chicago, who'd been mistaken for a busboy 3 times before someone realized he was a guest. Each story ended with the same line, "I filed it, now it's counted." Naomi leaned in, proud. "What's this for?" Imani looked up, eyes soft. "For the kids who didn't get to tell their story first." The final scene wasn't dramatic. No press, no stage. It was just Imani walking into a small corner cafe with her mom. This time, no one stared. The barista smiled and asked her name, not for verification, just because he wanted to get it right on the cup. And when she sat down at the table, Naomi handed her a tiny silver pin, a circle, with a single word engraved in the middle, "Counted." Imani held it in her palm, silently, then pinned it to her jacket, and smiled. Not for the world, not for a headline, but because she knew. She didn't just win. She changed the scoreboard. It was supposed to be just another ethics summit, held at the Interagency Civic Compliance Forum in Atlanta. The 3-day event had gathered hundreds of regulators, nonprofit leaders, and corporate execs from across the country. But this year, something was different. For the first time in its history, the keynote speaker was not a CEO, not a senator, not a published author or political giant. It was a 14-year-old girl in sneakers, jeans, and a hoodie with the words, "Observer Zero," stitched on the cuff. Imani Sinclair. By the time she stepped onto the main stage, most attendees already knew the basics of her story. They knew the soup incident. They knew about the Maison and Moreau collapse. They'd read the headlines. Some had even tried to co-opt her name for clout. But they didn't know her. Not until she started to speak. "I didn't ask to become part of your system," she began, standing still at the center of the stage. No podium, no notes. "Your system chose me the moment it decided I didn't belong in a seat I paid for." The room went still. Imani looked around, not intimidated, but intentional. "I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't throw a chair. I filed an entry." She held up her phone. One tap. That's all it took. One entry. One kid, one restaurant. $92 million gone in under 5 days. She let it breathe, then leaned in. "Imagine what 10,000 of us can do." Murmurs swept across the ballroom. Not fear, realization. Because it wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement with architecture, and it had already begun reshaping industries. 3 floors up, in a closed-door breakout session, Naomi Sinclair met with 6 of the top federal policy advisors from the Office of Urban Infrastructure, Department of Education, and the National Youth Civil Council. They weren't here to brainstorm. They were here to request. "We're ready to integrate the CIP Observer model into the National Charter Schools network," one advisor said. "But we'd need the back-end access protocols." Naomi didn't flinch. "This isn't for surveillance, not for data mining, not for headline chasing," she said. "If you're serious about implementation, you need to agree to the 3 baseline pillars." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, it read, "The Sinclair Principles Youth-Led Design. Restorative first, punitive last. Transparency without retaliation." A long pause. Then the lead advisor nodded. "We agree." Naomi exhaled. That was one more gate opened, one more system leaning toward dignity. Meanwhile, in Detroit, a mother named Serena watched the summit from her phone while folding laundry. Her 12-year-old son, Tyler, peeked over her shoulder. "Is that the girl?" he asked. Serena nodded. "The one with the soup." Tyler frowned. "She doesn't look mad." "She doesn't have to," Serena said. "She already won." Tyler was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "Can I report what happened to me at the pool last week, when the guy told me I didn't look like a guest?" Serena's hands froze mid-fold. "You want to file it in CIP?" Tyler nodded. She grabbed her phone. Together they filed his first entry. He smiled. He didn't feel like a victim anymore. He felt like a witness. Back in Atlanta, Imani exited the stage to a standing ovation. Not the performative kind, but a slow-build, hands-to-heart kind of applause. She walked straight backstage, ignoring reporters, refusing press. She wasn't interested in becoming a brand. She wanted to stay a blueprint. Naomi caught up with her near the exit, holding a tablet. "You need to see this," she said. On screen, CIP entries spiked by 42% nationwide in the last 6 hours. But the more surprising figure? Restoration track enrollment just doubled. Even the holdout chains, the ones who denied, delayed, deflected, were starting to opt in. Not because they had a change of heart, because dignity became a cost of doing business. And that was irreversible. Later that week, Imani received a letter, not an email, not a tweet, a real letter. The envelope was handwritten. Inside it read, "Dear Imani, you don't know me. I was the assistant manager that day. I didn't stop him. I didn't speak up. I looked away. You didn't just change the system. You made me realize I was part of why the system failed. I lost my job, but I also lost my silence. I've joined a restorative training program, and I wanted you to know that even though I didn't say anything then, I hear you now. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for documenting. M.R. Imani read it twice, then folded it carefully. She didn't need closure. She needed momentum. Weeks passed, then months. CIP rolled out in 4 more countries. A global passenger rights consortium adopted the observer reporting model. Netflix approached Naomi for rights to produce a documentary. She declined. Stories this important, she told them, should be told by the people who lived them, not packaged by people who didn't. Instead, Naomi and Imani launched Project Counted, a nonprofit initiative to train youth across the country in observational reporting, ethics advocacy, and systems literacy. Their motto? Document, don't disappear. One day in New York, Imani walked past a bus stop ad featuring her own face. Someone had used a still image from the summit keynote, paired with the quote, "One entry, one kid, one system." Everything moved. She paused, looked up at it, then quietly pulled a marker from her bag and wrote one more word under the quote, "Together," then kept walking. In the final pages of her journal, Imani wrote something she hadn't said out loud before. People say I'm the reason Maison Moro fell, but they were already broken. I just turned the light on. They say I changed the rules, but the rules were already wrong. I just wrote them down. They say I sparked a movement, but the truth is, we were already moving. I just gave us something to aim at. And as summer ended and school began again, Imani Sinclair returned not as a celebrity, not even as a reformer, just as a girl who didn't raise her voice, but still made the whole world listen. Imani didn't think the day would feel this quiet, not silent, just still. The type of stillness that follows a thunderstorm. When the power's back on, the rain stopped, and for the first time in days, there's nothing buzzing, breaking, or burning. It was the morning of her 15th birthday. No media, no summit, no CIP spike. Just pancakes, her mom humming off-key in the kitchen, and the soft tick of the living room clock. It should have felt underwhelming after everything they'd been through. But for Imani, it felt like healing. Later that afternoon, they walked into the community center downtown, where a mural unveiling was scheduled. Naomi had mentioned it briefly the night before, but didn't say much, just that some students from Project Counted had a surprise. Imani figured it was a collage or maybe a quote wall. She wasn't expecting what she saw. The moment they stepped inside, a cloth was pulled from the far wall, revealing a mural that stretched nearly 20 feet wide. It wasn't a painting of her face. It was dozens of small portraits, black, brown, disabled, hijabi, queer, poor, rural, all different kids, different stories. At the center, a girl with soup dripping from her sleeve, holding a phone in one hand and a pen in the other. Below her, written in bold brushstrokes, "We are not the incident, we are the evidence." Imani felt her throat close. She turned and saw a boy she didn't know walking up to her. Maybe 13, maybe younger. He wore a badge that said, "Peer Reporter, Zone 7. He reached out and handed her a folder. "Your file," he said quietly. She opened it. Inside were dozens of CIP entries filed over the past year, all referencing her story as the reason the kids chose to speak up. She looked back at him. "How did you get all these?" He smiled. "We asked for permission. You taught us that too." Imani didn't respond. She just nodded, because the words weren't there yet. Weeks later, Imani found herself walking into the federal CIP oversight hearing in Washington, D.C. Not as a witness, not as a victim, but as a co-architect. The committee had invited her and Naomi to help finalize the Restoration Compliance Mandate, a policy that would tie government hospitality contracts to CIP participation and verified ethics scores. Imani sat quietly during most of the hearing, letting Naomi speak on structural risks and economic incentives. But when a senator asked, "Why should we trust teenagers to lead an accountability system?" Imani leaned in. She didn't raise her voice, didn't blink. She just said, "Because we're the only ones still willing to hope." The room fell still, and the bill passed 13-0. Back in Atlanta, Imani walked the halls of her old middle school, this time not as a student, but as part of a training rollout team. Every 6th and 7th grader was getting onboarded to the new Mini Observer program, with age-friendly protocols and teacher safeguards. But what caught Imani off guard was the response from staff. Ms. Ramirez, who once told Imani not to act so sensitive about cafeteria jokes, pulled her aside. "I owe you," she said. "I didn't see it then. I do now." Imani didn't gloat, didn't offer false forgiveness. She just said, "Make sure the next kid doesn't need a crisis to be believed." Ms. Ramirez nodded and got to work. At a tech summit in California that same month, Robert Williams, Imani's father, announced a full pivot at his firm. 20% of all future R&D would focus on dignity-driven tech systems, starting with a CIPE integrated customer feedback model for the hospitality and transit industries. He ended the presentation with a single slide. It was a picture of Imani as a toddler, in overalls, standing in front of his old server room. Captioned, "She taught me that power without dignity isn't innovation. It's just noise." The room stood up, and not just out of respect, but because something had shifted. A year passed. Maison and Morrow was gone. The industry had changed. But what mattered most? Imani had changed too. Not into something bigger, just something more whole. She still walked into restaurants cautiously, still had moments where she second-guessed kindness, still wore the same hoodie from that first CIP report, the one with Observer 0 stitched into the cuff. But now, when a waiter smiled and said, "Welcome in," she smiled back and believed it. That fall, a high school in Oakland launched a student-led ethics journal. Their first article? The Price of Silence, How a Teenager Made Dignity a Measurable Standard. At the bottom of the page, the editorial note read, "This story doesn't belong to one girl. It belongs to every kid who didn't fight back, but didn't disappear." And one day, 2 years later, a small black girl in Jackson, Mississippi walked into a library. She had just been told to leave a restaurant for asking too many questions. She sat at a computer, Googled something, typed CIP entry form, and underneath the form was a quote, one that changed everything for her. "You don't have to yell, you just have to document." She did, and it all started again. And now we want to hear from you. Has there ever been a moment in your life, maybe small, maybe quiet, where you chose dignity over drama, where you didn't yell, but stood your ground anyway? Tell us where you're watching from, and drop a if you've ever had to speak up without raising your voice. Because like Imani showed us, you don't have to be loud to make the world listen. You just have to leave a record. We'll be reading the comments, and if this story moved you, make sure you're subscribed, because the next one might just be your story.